New Zealand Business Podcast, brought to you by Gorilla Technology, your strategic and proactive IT partner.
This is the Sales and Marketing Insider Edition, and I'm your host, Paul Spain. Today, we're speaking with Julian Smith, who is the General Manager of Global Marketing at Rockit Global. Since taking charge of global marketing in 2020, Julian has seen the sales at Rockit Global grow from 15 million to an impressive 150 million. Julian's experience in marketing includes working across some of New Zealand's greatest brands, including Icebreaker, Fisher & Paykel, Earthwise, Steinlager Pure, and Les Mills International, to name just a few. Julian and the team at Rockit Global were winners of the Supreme Award and the Large Business Award at the New Zealand International Business Awards that have just taken place in October. The New Zealand Business Podcast Sales and Marketing Insider Edition is brought to you by Gorilla Technology and 40 Thieves Nut Butters. Gorilla are the go-to company for innovative small to medium New Zealand organisations who want the best of managed technology and cybersecurity services. Well, let's jump in. Great to chat. Great to have you in the studio, Julian. How are you?
Yeah, really good. Thanks. Great to be here, Paul. Yeah.
Look, we go back quite a way. It's really exciting to sort of, sit down and to hear a little bit about, what you've achieved in your career, and I guess the opportunity to, take some learnings from that, because you've had some incredible success. You've worked with some amazing brands and really helped move the needle for those brands. So I'm kind of keen to hear, where did it all begin? Where did you grow up? And
sure.
and what was sort of the foundations to your career in terms of study and so on?
Yeah. So probably for me, I grew up from quite a humble sort of background, and one of the things for me was just really looking at what potential I could have in my career, what I could do in my life. And I think some of the biggest drivers were actually, what does success actually look like for someone coming from a humble kind of Auckland in a suburb, and how far can I sort of go? So one of the drivers, I guess, was, from that kind of humble background. I think the other thing was I was really into sport, and it was such a motivator for me. I could see people performing at a kind of a high level. I was fascinated by the Olympics as a kid, and I could just see sort of people driving through achievement and success, I guess, through perseverance and determination. So as a kid, I just became sort of obsessed with training and getting into sport. But equally, I was kind of a fascinating kind of person in that I was in the, out in the field, but I was equally in the art room, so I was there with some of the creative kids as well, and trying to find my identity, I guess, as a younger person with quite a varied sort of set of interests. So, when I found marketing, I found a way actually to combine those interests, whether it be sort of sport, music, art, design, and kind of bring that all to bear, really. So, those were kind of the original kind of influences for me to get into marketing and to look at what I could take out into the world stage, and maybe my unique way of kind of approaching my career and approaching my field was based on all those kind of interests. Yeah,
fascinating. So how did you decide what and where to study?
I guess my dad had quite a big influence on my life as a younger person, and he could see that I was the kid that was kind of going to school and actually selling other kids cut up versions of products, for a profit. So he was like, you should get into commerce. And as a younger kid, I was like, what is a Bachelor of Commerce? What's this? But he was quite a motivating kind of person. So I studied at Auckland University. He suggested actually that if I did that at the time, it was quite a good thing for an international career. And he was right. I think it was actually where I really thrived. In my school years, I was really busy sort of kicking goals and playing rugby, and quite a social kid. And I didn't really get into my sort of education. I didn't really put the effort in, but as soon as I got to university, it was really great. I was able to kind of thrive a whole lot more doing topics and studying things that were of real interest to me. So I did a whole lot better at university actually, and sort of found my niche, I think, once I started doing a Bachelor of Commerce. Yeah.
Now, looking back at that Bachelor of Commerce, was there anything in particular that was a good foundation for your career that you'd look at and think now,
Yeah.
that actually really has helped?
Yeah, it's funny, because everyone always talks about how this doesn't help you, and why am I studying algebra at 16? What's it going to do for me? But it was kind of the reverse, I think, when I got to university, and that everything was just so appropriate. Excuse me, I will take some water here. My international business papers, for example, were just so helpful for me. Learning about how to set up transnational companies and looking at a bigger world, and those papers were just great grounding. I did minors in art history as well, so that enabled me to still kind of delve into my creative side at university as well. And then my marketing stats and my numbers side was really important as well. So learning about kind of computer programs really early on. It's funny, in those days, one of the questions in the management science papers was, what is the internet? It was literally a question in my third year at university. And
Wow.
I think out of 900 students, I think 5 people got it right. So very much, huge change, but great grounding then in terms of sort of looking at ways that the world was going to go through a technology change. And I guess my career sort of spans a lot of that in terms of going from faxing right through to sort of where we are today. So highly appropriate.
Yeah. So tell us about entering the workforce. What were your first roles?
So actually, I sort of reflect on, probably my biggest break came through sort of a kid from pretty humble background. I was literally pushing trolleys at the local Three Guys supermarket in my teenage years. I was on like the most minimum wage. I think I was literally on $1.89 after tax per hour. It was something criminal. And I used to have to give a lot to my family just to kind of make it through. That's how sort of skin of a teeth we were. So sorry, I got a husky throat here, but I actually got a break meeting a guy who had a role that was going at one of the law firms in town, Bell Gully, who looked at sort of a young guy and thought, okay, we'll bring him into our summer clerk team. And I went from sort of $1.89 after tax to $20 an hour. And it was like, oh my goodness, this is crazy. This is totally going to be game changing for me. So I think that was kind of the original kind of impetus to look at how I might get more into business and more seeking some of these roles. And so I realized actually quite quickly working for Bell Gully that I didn't want to be a lawyer, but I was, really thankful for their approach, taking on someone like myself. But it was kind of more observing their marketing team actually and thinking, actually maybe I should take up this marketing degree that my dad's been talking about, because I actually quite enjoy what they're doing. So my last year of summer clerking there, I was able to sort of join the marketing team and get some experience that way. So that was kind of my first kicker into the whole field.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
That was great that you were able to make that pivot within the organization. Was that hard to engineer?
Bell Gully was actually a really great company at the time, and they were looking to really help younger people and bring them on and give them experience. So it was actually just one conversation, and it was quite simple actually. So,
but you initiated that?
Yeah. So I went to my kind of manager at the time and said, hey, actually, the law side is probably not for me. I really enjoy the commercial law side, and maybe that's good grounding into marketing, but can I get some experience this year as a kicker into that? And then probably my next kind of key role was I was young enough and open enough, I guess, to challenge and risk. And I met a guy who was selling wetsuits out the back of his car at Struck and Stride, which was a local kind of swimming event down in St Heliers. And he had a business called Performance Speed Suits, and he said to me, "Oh, look, why don't you join my company? Because I've got this great world-beating kind of product, but I need someone like you with a marketing degree, and you could come in and help me sell it overseas." So this was in late 90s, and Performance Speed Suits at the time was kind of selling less than $100,000 worth of product, mostly domestically. But we turned that business into Orca and grew that around the world over the next sort of 7-8 years. Yeah.
Orca, I mean, a real big New Zealand success story. How much did that grow?
It grew a lot. Yeah, I think we had some fantastic success trying to look at creating the world's fastest wetsuit. It was always the vision, and I think great businesses, great brands always have a really clear vision. So we articulated quite naively, really. We had this kind of can-do attitude from New Zealand, in that we didn't really know what we couldn't do. We were young guys trying to take on the world, but we had this ambition of how do we create the world's fastest wetsuit, and I think that carried us through a lot of other almost like failings or things that we got wrong early on. But that was a really great time for us to kind of throw my head in the ring, and for a number of us just to give it a crack, to try and grow it. And we went from kind of nothing really to rebranding to Orca, to launching that at key events, to taking Orca to the Olympics, to growing 100% year on year for 3 or 4 years, and becoming probably the leading triathlon brand in the world just after the Olympics in 2004. So it was a really great success story. Orca sold out to Orbea, a big Spanish cycling brand. So yeah, it was a good kind of Kiwi success story of growing and then with an exit. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, during these things, as you alluded to, there'll be a lot of challenges, right?
Yeah.
But those are great times of learning. What would you
Yeah.
say were the big learnings from your period there?
I think probably one of the things is just you're going to fail when you start off, and probably the thing you've got to work out is making sure that you have measured risks so you don't go too far, So we learned quite quickly through our production, through our marketing, that it wasn't always going to be on point. And in fact, sometimes we didn't even really know what we're doing. So I'll give you a couple of examples. So, we did some work around the Olympics for the first year, and I came out with this great ad. I thought it was going to be world beating, put it all around the world, the world's fastest Olympic wetsuit. And I received a letter from the International Olympic Committee within sort of 30 days saying, "Hey, look, you're trading off our intellectual property." And it was a letter to sort of say, you owe us $50,000 and you're in breach of our rights. And so we sort of looked at each other and we thought, what do we do here? We certainly don't have $50,000 to stump up and pay the International Olympic Committee. So we said, look, probably the best thing we can do is just give them a call and maybe get someone in who's the representative of the local chapter and have a bit of a chat. So we did that. And I think they came in, and our National Olympic Committee as well sort of looked in and said, oh, who are these guys? Let's build some relationship. How can we maybe turn this around? And part of that became us sponsoring the New Zealand Olympic Committee and the national team with gear, talking to them about how we were in breach, but certainly we wouldn't make that mistake again. And just educating us really around in New Zealand what was the Flag and Emblems Act and how we needed to manage those properties. So I think when you make mistakes, you're better to just try and build relationship, be honest, work through it. And certainly probably the learning is to try and make smaller mistakes as you go through business. But yeah, I mean, we were some young guys who had this passion, had this idea of taking on the world. And I think it was probably some of the best learning I could ever have, almost a almost a young person doing an MBA, really, in international business through that time. Yeah, it was great.
Fantastic. And then what was the next step, and why did you exit that? Because you moved into an agency type role, right?
Yeah. So I think Orca had kind of run its course. I really enjoyed working with a team there, and some of them I still keep up with. A great business guy, Jamie Hunt, who now works. He's got a new business actually that we worked on the brand together called Precio, and he came out of the 2XU business. We worked together at Orca. So some really great connections now with like-minded people. But it was just really time. I lived up in Hong Kong for a couple of years and based myself there and got some international experience, like creating a purchasing office up there for Orca. And then when it was sold, I think it was just the time to kind of move on. So I was looking for something a little bit different. I had returned back to New Zealand. I was living here. And I was quite keen on maybe broadening my scope because I'd done sort of sports marketing and with Orca obviously taking that right around the world. But I was quite keen on looking at other industries and other challenges. So we'd work with a really kind of boutique but creative agency and probably New Zealand's best brand person in the 80s and 90s. His name was Brian Richards, and he had a practice that was kind of game-changing for a lot of businesses in New Zealand. And his kind of thinking was world-class in New Zealand, where he'd seen and observed a lot of businesses who would take in brand and brand-led thinking in Europe especially, and kind of applied that thinking to New Zealand. So I'd got a lot out of working with him, and we started talking, and then we developed a partnership to kind of take the agency, which we grew from it was quite small, grew from sort of 7-8 people to about 42 people over the 10 years that I was involved. But it was less about numbers, I guess, but more about the influence. And we were able to work in with a lot of New Zealand businesses that wanted brand and marketing to be kind of a key part of their mix. So yeah, we had a real specialization in primary sector and food and beverage, and taking kind of businesses that were differentiated and putting them on the world stage. Yeah.
So what's a sort of, summary of the playbook that you would follow to do that? Because, as a nation, that's what we need to do, right? We need to take, the incredible, products that come out of the, ingenuity and the smarts that Kiwis often have with coming up with things that are unique and different to what else is out there.
Yes.
And we need to take those things onto the global stage.
We do, and that's been a big passion of mine. A big part of my work actually is to create these brands that are world leading in the categories that are differentiated in that way. I think a big part of the model that we used to use, which I talk about quite frequently and openly, is that you've got to, I touched on it before, but you need a really strong vision. You need to set an ambition. That's kind of the first bit. But you need to articulate that in the way that it's different. So that's kind of step number one. Step number two is you then need to kind of find your story. So a big part of the brands that I've worked on in my career, we've put storytelling really at the forefront of those. So how do you create a really unique story? And we talk about a story that the world's never heard before. So it has to be your story. It has to be authentic. It has to be engaging. It has to be quite rich and deep. And so a lot of the businesses I've worked with, including Rockit, where I'm at now, you actually go to long format. You go into, chapters of your story. What makes you different? How do you create that texture, that uniqueness? And it should exist in some long format. You might only ever use it in short form, but there's almost like a storybook that you develop for it. So that's a big part of what we did in the agency. We wrote the story of Icebreaker, we wrote the story of Steinlager Pure. We wrote the backstory for Fisher and Paykel, appliances. It's that type of thing that you can draw from as a source document. So that's step number two. Step number three is, how do you then bring design and the visual articulation of that story and that vision to life? And so, a big part of my influence is always try to find, interesting design, things that are quite out of the category that can influence, so I try and do that with every project, but design plays such a key role. And I think we've got great designers in New Zealand. We have world-beating people in this country that can help businesses to create something really unique and world-leading.
Yeah, I
So that's
agree.
that third space. And then the fourth one is the one that's taken me a while in my career actually to understand and actually outwork. And probably only my last two roles have I really started to bring that culture side in. So the fourth part is, how do you get a network of people, a culture behind a brand and a business and its marketing? So we create what we call kind of an infectious culture, people that carry it, and people that kind of connect that brand and that marketing through the channel into the end consumer. So that's really important as well. You want to kind of create brand heat in a way that people just end up loving your brand, and that's really the key. So that model is one of the models that I've used out throughout my whole career. Yeah.
Sounds pretty challenging. That last bit, create brand heat.
Yeah.
That must vary a lot from one brand to another in terms of how you create that excitement, that attention, and so on, right?
Yeah, it does. And I think that's a real challenge. That's a cool part of the brand side of marketing is, how do you create something that people will love and connect to? I think people buy things or in communities of things that they love and care about. How do you create that no matter what category it is? And I think, my recent role kind of shows you that no matter what it is, even if it's commodity and it's a real challenging product, that you can still do that if you're clever. Yeah.
Great. Anything else from that time in agency land with Brian Richards, that was sort of any other lessons that sort of stand out?
Yeah, I think that those businesses that take that time and take that effort to differentiate themselves, I have seen them really win over time. And I think the principles of brand and marketing put in those ways mean that you can actually really stand out in your category. I think the other thing that we touched on is, products that can try and trade up over time will really win out in terms of their position, in terms of their pricing, in terms of the value that they're creating. So it's a real, as you say, it's a real challenge to try and trade up and not just be in the middle market. But there's a whole kind of position which you look at kind of between prestige and mainstream. And it's almost like, it sounds like a strange word, but this idea of kind of masstige marketing, which is right in that sweet spot, where people will pay a little bit more. It's perceived with those premium cues. It's not super premium though. It appeals to a growing number of consumers around the world who have higher disposable incomes. That's the positioning for New Zealand products that can really win. And so that's what we've been pursuing, and finding out what consumers are kind of thinking in and around that kind of positioning in the market. So that's been another thing that I've always tried to pursue, is that masstige positioning.
I like that. I like that that term and that thinking of sort of mass market, but not the budget offering, but there's obviously something special there.
Yeah, I read a really good article in Harvard Business Review in 2002. It's quite an old article, all about this concept. I think it was written by Silverstein, who was a really great marketer in the US. And it was game changing for me at Orca at the time, because it talked all about how trading up, reaching this new kind of consumer that was emerging in the world, and particularly in the States and Europe. And often how a lot of the decisions in the home were being made by these consumers who had a little bit more income. They were interested in brands, and they were starting to more than ever be more savvy around what was their kind of personal choices in life. So that, I think it was called Trading Up in Harvard Business Review.
Now you moved across to Les Mills International. You were global marketing director there. Tell us a little bit about that, because that seems like a really good alignment for you. And I remember following some of your sort of social posts.
Yes.
During that period, 2016 through to 2020.
Yeah.
And it did seem like you were in a real sweet spot with that sort of crossover of your marketing talent and also your interest in sport and fitness.
Yes. Oh, look, I think that's probably a sweet spot for the whole industry. That time it was a real boom for fitness. We had probably the leader in group fitness in the world in Les Mills International. We had grown to, over that time, we grew to, I think, 15,000 clubs to well over 20,000 clubs who were licensing our workouts. So you kind of think of Les Mills and you think, oh, it's those great gyms, in Victoria Street or Newmarket, but actually there's a whole nother business called Les Mills International, which licenses the workouts around the world. And Philip Mills has been, probably one of the pioneers of the whole industry. A handful of people in the world, probably 5 people who have been the most important people in the whole fitness industry, and he'd be one of those 5 people. So you've got a really great kind of person leading that business in a way that's been revolutionary. So it was just really special to be a part of it, actually. And it's a family-owned business, which is really unique in the world. I think Burton's the only bigger kind of family-owned sports business in the world still, as a snowboarding business. So, I think sometimes you forget how great that company is out in New Zealand. So, yeah, I think I took on that challenge. I worked a lot with Philip closely during that time, which was really great. And we were able to take Les Mills out to a lot more consumers, millions more people around the world, which was a real passion of mine, fitness and sport. So it's great. Yeah.
Yeah. So what was it that you had to start with, and then you evolved that? There was sort of a technological aspect to it, or what were the what was sort of the difference in terms of what you ended up doing? Was it a product change, or was it how much was it marketing and innovation? How did that sort of fit together?
I think there were probably a few things in terms of my influence on the business, and maybe the creative design side was the first piece. So there were some great parts to the brand, but the brand had some real naff parts as well when I turned up.
Naff. I love
things that just weren't that cool, to be honest.
Yeah.
And group fitness wasn't that cool. But probably the first opportunity was to work in with the global partner Reebok, who was becoming cooler. They were seeing fitness as a way to kind of grow their brand internationally, and they were doing some cool stuff actually with CrossFit at the time, and so we sort of said, hey, which was the beginning of that sort of sport. We said, hey, well, look, why don't we come at this and actually level up our marketing, our creativity together, and how can that play a role for the whole of Les Mills? So we went out and we tried to find some of the world's best sports photographers, So we started working with people like Carlos Sorrell and people who were known worldwide as the best sports photographers in the world, and creatives. We started working with some of the big agencies out of the US who could kind of take the business to another level with their creative ideas. And so I just sort of set an expectation that this should be a world-class brand, and everything we do should be at that kind of level. So that's probably one of my key influences through that relationship with Reebok, who I spent a lot of time with up in Boston. And then the second thing, is probably more a part of a team with the technology changes going on in the fitness category at the time was, we were in 20,000 gyms, bricks and mortar, and everyone did their group fitness by turning up and, going into that class. But we had, a real change with more and more people just every year saying, hey, can I do these workouts at home as well? And so technology was playing more of a role. So as I say, a team of us, probably the head of music at the time, Philip, who was interested obviously, and other people in the business, Vaughan, who headed up Les Mills Enterprises. We sort of said, how can we take this into a technology platform? And we were seeing brands like Kayla Eatonus out of Australia grow from sort of nothing to sort of 10 million followers, with her fitness products online and through digital applications. So we looked at starting what was called Les Mills On Demand. And I can remember the early model had, less than sort of 200 people on the platform. But we started investing into that and growing that over time. And boy, it was probably the right thing with what happened with COVID, coming at that business really early on, being in China, that hit that company quite quickly. So Les Mills On Demand became Les Mills Plus, which it is today, and the model is a really successful model in terms of taking it to an in-home experience and setting it up so hundreds of thousands of people can do Les Mills in their homes.
Yeah, that's amazing. So now it's all about Rockit. Rockit Global and selling apples. How hard is it to sell apples and to sell a lot of apples? Because you're selling $150 million worth of apples a year now, right? So
it's a lot, right? So,
walk us through the story and how you were, enticed into to the world of apples.
I think it was a real challenge for me. I think I was excited about taking on a commodity. People always sort of said, "Oh, Julian, how hard is it to sell, the world's leading workout around the world, or how hard is it to sell such a cool brand like Orca, or be involved with, Stone Lager Pure? It's a great product anyway." But taking on a commodity brand out of Hawke's Bay with quite a sort of humble company and saying, how do you create the world's most loved apple brand, and how do you engage millions of consumers to love a brand that's the humble apple? It was quite a challenge, actually. I thought it was a great one, and Pioneer Capital, who own the business, were really keen on bringing me in, and with a couple of other key executives. So it was just the right timing, I guess. The fitness industry was going through a really tough time, and I could see that the food industry, and particularly high quality food products out in New Zealand, were going to be in hot demand. And then the other piece of research that I did was just around pre-packaged food. So Rockit's got that massive advantage in the world where food safety and other attributes of the product were just world beating. So so it was a really great thing to take on and sort of see what I could do with it, and a bit of a better up moment. A lot of people I spoke to were like, "Shit, Julian, what are you doing? Like taking on, you're the king of kind of sports marketing and fun businesses that you're involved in, but you're taking on an Apple brand." People didn't get it. So I'm really delighted that I've been able to sort of do what I've done with Rockit.
Maybe for listeners that don't know about the brand, and there's always a few people that maybe have been living under a rock or what have you, but maybe you can walk through what Rockit is and what is what's different about it in terms of its packaging, its distribution, and so on.
Sure. So Rockit's probably truly the only snacking apple in the world. So it had that great point of difference. It's a miniature apple recognized by the UN, but we had to actually convince people that it was a fully mature apple. And people didn't believe us or want to believe us when it started out. So it's packs a massive punch in terms of nutrition, though. So it's half the size, but double kind of the nutrition of a normal apple. So it's like a superfood. And it's got these great qualities where it's snackable, it's portable, it's mobile, and it comes in a unique kind of pre-washed, ready-to-eat packaging, which is now in multi formats around the world, as well as we look at innovating in a sustainable way in the category, so that we have different types of offerings for consumers around the world. So it's got a great product advantage in that sense. And that was the other look in that I did is, how much could this win? I think great marketing is a combination of a product advantage and a brand advantage. So I had to have both, really. So when I had a look at it, its nutritional aspects, and I had a look at the portability of it, I thought, how do we take this into a different distribution network? how do we come out of the fruit aisle? How might we go into the premium side of the equation? How maybe can we even go into the snacking category? You know, can we go into airports? Can we go into gyms? Can we take this little apple and put it in places that people don't expect? So a big part of it has been the surprise and delight factor, and that's been fantastic. So we've managed to put it into some of the world's highest kind of value markets. So we're really big in Greater China. We're big in the Middle East. We're winning in Southeast Asia. The US product has gone gangbusters. If you think of our price, which was at $3.99 for a 3-pound equivalent, and we're now at $9, just sort of 2.5 years later for that same amount of product. It's trading up. So that's been phenomenal. Yeah.
So when you've got a product that does as well as this, then you tend to get copycats, right?
Yeah.
So what does that aspect sort of look like, and what challenges does that create, or have you got such a unique apple that no one else has been able to come up with, something anywhere in the ballpark yet?
You know, I think one of the things when you're successful with your marketing is that people start to steal it. It's probably one really good tipping point for a brand.
Yeah.
So I remember with Orca, people started stealing our signage at races, you know, and we'd be looking at a stand, we'd be like, where'd that poster go? And someone had literally stolen it. And I can remember sort of saying to Scott, who, you know, was the founder owner, I said, you know, we've reached that tipping point where people are stealing it. We're actually quite hot now. So that happens, but that happens in a physical way with consumers wanting to kind of connect to the branded elements. But unfortunately, obviously, it happens with competitive markets as well. And you often kind of birth a whole lot of either counterfeit or other companies that want to kind of trade off your positioning, right, when you do it right. So, you know, what I've learned over the years is you've really got to sort of look at defending yourself in the right way, which is appropriate. And there's different levels of defense. So one of them is just sort of coming at the copycats, coming at the people who are passing off, and, you know, defending at that level, which over time you probably can't actually win over time, depending on how big or how far that goes. In certain categories, it can be really hard to stop all of that. So that's kind of one area. The other area is, I guess, propagation of things like varieties like Rockit, where you can defend and win over time. So you sort of make sure that your plant variety or your sort of secret sauce or whatever it might be for your industry, you know, should register, make sure that you've got the patent or you've got the registration around that. And I think you can win there in that kind of area. So, you know, investing into your intellectual property or investing into your rights is really key. I think a lot of what I've done has ended up with high equity in the brands that we work with. And so having big programs that do cover off trademarking, cover off registrations is important actually for the rights owners. And, you know, you're seeing that increasingly with rights owners being able to exercise and open up different channels and ways to get to consumers. So I think that's just so key in today's world, you know, whether it's in the digital space, whether it's in through NFTs or in through Web3, you know, rights owners are going to be the ones that win over time. So yeah, that's really key.
Mm-hmm. Now, just your mention there of obviously sort of, you know, Orca posters stolen and so on.
Yeah.
Yeah, when you were talking about Les Mills International, one of the things that, you know, was just so clear in my mind was the incredible visual element of your marketing. And then when you mentioned Orca, I remembered the same thing. It seems as though that's sort of been part of kind of your DNA and how you operate is to, you know, to make part of it visuals that really, you know, are memorable and connect for people.
Yeah, look, I think I was really fortunate early on to be part of Better by Design in New Zealand, and there were 9 people in New Zealand. I was probably 20 years the youngest, who were coached in Better by Design practices, and then used as coaches, in turn used as coaches. And the early version of that program, Jeremy Moon spared a lot of that from Icebreaker, and he was keen on New Zealand businesses being design-led. And so he involved IDEO quite early on, and he got a number of us educated around the principles of design and how design could play a role within business. And I think that was foundational for me, and I was given that opportunity. I think both Jeremy and Brian were really keen for a younger person like myself coming through to understand these principles, understand what businesses could do. So I just think design's played such a key role, one in the aesthetics, but equally just in the role of what design and that way of thinking and solving problems, like a designer can bring about, whether it's in products or in service design. So it's been a big part of kind of the way that I work, the way that I think. I'll always try and bring creatives into a problem or into a project. I'll always be pushing the businesses to kind of think about it from a design lens. And I guess it's part of, as I said, that early kind of wiring that I had where, creativity was such a key part, and being in the art room was just as important to me as being on the field or being, in the mathematics kind of arena or in the business arena. So, yeah, I think it's a big part of what I've done and built into those brands. It's part of maybe my signature that I've left on a few of those brands as well. Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah. Yeah. Now, there's something, I'm not sure if it's on your LinkedIn, but you've been doing some work down this track of NFTs, non-fungible tokens, and it sort of relates back to some of what we were talking about with Rockit and IP and so on. So can you walk us through what's happening on that front?
Yeah, sure. So look, I guess I'm learning, is probably the first bit. Is that's an area for the last just over a year now that I've been working in with the team at Glorious Digital and learning really, and just being an extension to their marketing team, working in with Murray Tom and Tim Harper, and Dan Carter's obviously involved, and trying to navigate, I guess, a very changing world week to week, and working on projects and looking at great world-leading properties like Wimbledon and other projects that they have, to sort of say, how do we apply a lens to this, which can build on some of the principles that I'm bringing from more of a traditional marketing sense, bringing those into a kind of a Web3 environment with Glorious, and trying to do things again from New Zealand, which can be world beating. So I just love that kind of part of what they're doing. They also got a really true kind of authentic model, Glorious, which is fantastic. And that I think Murray set up the business, for artists first and musicians and creators first, and try to work that model so that they get such an advantage working with Glorious. So that fits really well with me as well. But to be honest, it's been more out of interest and to see whether I can just kind of help them from an extension perspective to their marketing. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that, it's a really fascinating area, and I always think that, we've got to put on this futurist hat, like all of us need to, right? Be looking ahead at where things are heading, and there's always technology that's coming.
Yeah.
And if we just wait for it to become sort of completely mainstream, then often there's so many opportunities that can be missed out on. So I think it's important to experiment and embrace. So that's a great approach.
I think, Paul, like great marketers should be influenced from lots of different ways. So even though I'm working for an Apple brand, I'll spend a lot of time looking at design, looking at creativity, looking at technology, where it's going, trying to encourage my team, coach my team. What are you looking at? What are your reference points? What's happened over the weekend that's new in the world? So that whole space, I think, is really important for marketers to, even if they're not out working a whole lot of projects, think about maybe one thing that they can do in a Web3 environment, in the next 12 months, and how can they be involved with their projects? How can they be involved with what they're doing? and you can find ways, which are easy ways in to use those technologies, so you might be running an event and you might just put up a POAP, just a proof of attendance, and you just run it through that and just learn through that, as a really easy starting point. You might say, hey, we're actually looking at doing something a little bit more creative with some digital art for our business. So yeah, I think marketers should always be curious, and they should be constantly learning and being influenced by lots of things, Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Now, one question that I do like to ask is, if there was sort of one tip or one piece of advice that you could give listeners to sort of take away and implement tomorrow, what would that be?
I think it would be that if you don't already have a really strong vision for what you're doing, to try and articulate a vision in a way that's world-beating, and to spend time developing and crafting something that people can carry throughout the organization. So when we cracked for Rockit, we want to become the world's most loved Apple brand, and now a team of people kind of carry that. Just that vision has really enabled us to really switch on across a whole global network, a way to set that ambition, to set our kind of goals, our metrics, and kind of measure against that. So that would be probably the main thing. I think the other thing that I really learned at Les Mills International, which I've applied to Rockit, was just the power of setting your marketing metrics in a way that are measurable, but equally that are powerful. And so you have to have that ambition first, but then you have to sort of set your metrics in a way that, again, your team knows what it needs to deliver on. It's really clear, and you're bringing those metrics into a lot of your meetings, So that performance kind of led edge, I think, is what a lot of New Zealand businesses need, is to combine maybe their natural advantage or their natural flair in their category with that performance edge and the measurement of those metrics, and bring those into the conversation, bring those into their daily work, and even review them lots. I think maybe that's the thing that's missing in lots of New Zealand businesses, is that performance edge. Yeah.
And so how do you do that? How do you do that performance piece? You must have a lot of data points you can draw from. How do you decide what are the most important ones and the ones to look at? Otherwise, you could spend a day looking at numbers, right? But you need to be able to quite quickly, drill into the metrics that are going to be most valuable, and not sort of cloud people's views with too much data.
Yeah, I think you sort of look at the pillars that matter within your marketing mix. So I'll give you an example at Rockit. So we use brand as a pillar. So we measure prompted and unprompted awareness, globally. We've set that up through a partner in Sydney called Qualtrics, who does that across global markets for us. Who's a technology partner. So that's one pillar is brand. Then we look at consumer. How do we grow millions more consumers around the world? So we're looking at our data sets. We're looking at growing our connectedness globally. So those are metrics for us. So that's in that consumer pillar. And then we want to win, unashamedly, we want to win and surprise and delight people at point of sale with Rockit. So we set a number of point of sale metrics, whether it be exemplar stores, the number of exemplar stores we want around the world, or high impact displays that we want. So you suddenly start to work across your pillars that matter across your marketing mix, and then you set those metrics kind of accordingly. And then you use those across the team to say, hey, look, we had a goal of getting, I don't know, X number of 100 high impact displays around the world, or exemplar stores, and where we at. And you kind of use that as a measurement tool. So that's something, as I say, that is the discipline of that's kind of really come into my work, and being combined with the creative side. I think you've got a winning edge if you can combine those two.
Yeah, agreed. Oh, that's fantastic. Well, congratulations on your success, Julian. It is very exciting, especially following where things are going with Rockit, incredible growth, and really fascinated to sort of see, where to from here and what the next few years ahead holds. So all the best.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Paul. Look, I've really enjoyed having a chat, and that time's flying. So hopefully people have taken something out of that, but it's been fun. Thank you.
Brilliant. All right. Well, thanks everyone for joining us on the New Zealand Business Podcast. This has been the Sales and Marketing Insider Edition, and we'll be back real soon with another episode. All right. Thank you.